moved more than 175,000 troops, military equipment, and positions along the Ukrainian border. He moved blood supplies into position and built a field hospital, which tells you all you need to know about his intentions all along. He rejected every good faith effort the United States and our allies and partners made to address our mutual security concerns through dialogue to avoid needless conflict and avert human suffering. For weeks, we have been warning that this would happen. And now it's unfolding largely as we predicted. In the past week, we've seen shelling increase in the Donbass, a region in eastern Ukraine controlled by Russian-backed separatists. The Russian government has perpetrated cyber attacks against Ukraine. We saw a staged political theater in Moscow, outlandish and baseless claims that Ukraine was about to invade and launch a war against Russia, that Ukraine was prepared to use chemical weapons, that Ukraine committed a genocide. Without any evidence, we saw a flagrant violation of international law in attempting to unilaterally create two new so-called republics on sovereign Ukrainian territory. And at the very moment that the United Nations Security Council was meeting to stand up for Ukraine's sovereignty, to stave off invasion, Putin declared his war. Within moments, missile strikes began to fall on historic cities across Ukraine. Then came the air raids, followed by tanks and troops rolling in. We've been transparent with the world. We've shared declassified evidence about Russia's plans and cyber attacks and false pretexts so that there could be no confusion or cover-up about what Putin was doing. Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences. Today, I'm authorizing additional strong sanctions and new limitations on what can be exported to Russia. This is going to impose severe cost on the Russian economy, both immediately and over time. We have purposely designed these sanctions to maximize the long-term impact on Russia and to minimize the impact on the United States and our allies. I want to be clear. The United States is not doing this alone. For months, we've been building a coalition of partners representing well more than half the global economy. 27 members of the European Union, including France, Germany, Italy, as well as the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Australia.
Guys, I'll get to your questions after this. I see all of your questions coming in. I'll get to them. Don't worry.
I just spoke with the G7 leaders this morning, and we're in full and total agreement. We will limit Russia's ability to do business in dollars, euros, pounds, and yen to be part of the global economy. We'll limit their ability to do that. We're going to stunt the ability to finance and grow the Russian military. We're going to impose major, and we're going to impair their ability to compete in high-tech 21st century economy. We've already seen the impact of our actions on Russia's currency and the ruble, which early today hit its weakest level ever in history. The Russia stock market plunged today. The Russian government borrowing rate spiked by over 15%. In today's actions, we've now sanctioned Russian banks that together hold around $1 trillion in assets. We've cut off Russia's largest bank, a bank that holds more than 1/3 of Russia's banking assets by itself.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to get to your guys' questions, I promise. Let's just listen to this.
We're also blocking 4 more major banks. That means every asset they have in America will be frozen. This includes VTB, the second largest bank in Russia, which has $250 billion in assets. As promised, we're also adding the names to the list of Russian elites and their family members that we're sanctioning as well. As I said on Tuesday, these are people who personally gained from the Kremlin's policies, and they should share in the pain. We will keep up this drumbeat of those designations against corrupt billionaires in the days ahead. On Tuesday, we stopped the Russian government from raising money from U.S. or European investors. Now we're going to apply the same restrictions to Russia's largest state-owned enterprises. Companies with assets that exceed $1.4 trillion. Some of the most powerful impacts of our actions will come over time as we squeeze Russia's access to finances and technology for strategic sectors of its economy and degrade its industrial capacity for years to come. Between our actions and those of our allies and partners, we estimate that we'll cut off more than half of Russia's high-tech imports. It will strike a blow to their ability to continue to modernize their military. It will degrade their aerospace industry, including their space program. It will hurt their ability to build ships, reducing their ability to compete economically. And it will be a major hit to Putin's long-term strategic ambitions.
Unfortunately, I don't believe that.
In addition to the economic penalties,
I'll tell you why in a second.
we're also taking steps to defend our NATO allies, particularly in the East. Tomorrow, NATO will convene a summit. We'll be there to bring together the leaders of 30 allied nations and close partners to affirm our solidarity and to map out the next steps we will take to further strengthen all aspects of our NATO alliance. Although we provided over $650 million in defensive assistance to Ukraine just this last year, let me say it again. Our forces are not and will not be engaged in the conflict with Russia in Ukraine. Our forces are not going to Europe to fight in Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies and reassure those allies in the East. As I made crystal clear,
That's a very important point, especially if we're talking about the markets.
force of American power. And the good news is, NATO is more united and more determined than ever. There is no doubt that the United States and every NATO ally will meet our Article 5 commitments, which says that an attack on one is an attack on all. Over the past few weeks, I ordered thousands of additional forces to Germany and Poland as part of
Guys, hit that thumbs up so that more people find this stream. Please hit that thumbs up.
Russia's aggressive action, including its troop presence in Belarus and the Black Sea. I've authorized the deployment of ground and air forces already stationed in Europe to NATO's eastern flank allies, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Romania. Our allies have also been stepping up, adding the other allies, the rest of NATO, adding their own forces and capabilities to ensure collective defense. And today, within hours of Russia's unleashing its assault, NATO came together and authorized and activated an activation of response plans. This will enable NATO's high readiness forces to deploy and when and where they are needed to protect our NATO allies on the eastern boundaries of Europe. And now I'm authorizing additional U.S. force capabilities to deploy to Germany as part of NATO's response, including some of the U.S.-based forces that the Department of Defense placed on standby weeks ago.
Yep, those NASDAQ calls are doing amazing right now.
Austin and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley, about preparations for additional moves should they become necessary to protect our NATO allies and support the greatest military alliance in the history of the world, NATO. As we respond, my administration is using the tools, every tool at its disposal, to protect American families and businesses from rising prices at the gas pump. You know, we're taking active steps to bring down the cost, and American oil and gas companies should not exploit this moment to hike their prices to raise profits. You know, in our sanctions package, we specifically designed to allow energy payments to continue. We are closely monitoring energy supplies for any disruption. We've been coordinating with major oil-producing and consuming countries toward our common interest to secure global energy supplies. We are actively working with countries around the world to elevate collective release from the strategic petroleum reserves of major energy-consuming countries. And the United States will release additional barrels of oil as conditions warrant. I know this is hard and that Americans are already hurting. I will do everything in my power to limit the pain the American people are feeling at the gas pump. This is critical to me. But this aggression cannot go unanswered. If it did, the consequences for America would be much worse. America stands up to bullies. We stand up for freedom. This is who we are. Let me also repeat the warning I made last week. If Russia pursues cyber attacks against our companies, our critical infrastructure. We are prepared to respond. For months, we've been working closely with the private sector to harden our cyber defenses, sharpen our ability to respond to Russian cyber attacks as well. I spoke last night to President Zelensky of Ukraine, and I assured him that the United States, together with our allies and partners in Europe, will support the Ukrainian people as they defend their country. We'll provide humanitarian relief to ease their suffering. And in the early days of this conflict, Russia propaganda outlets will keep trying to hide the truth and claim.
Thanks for your donation to St. Jude's, Hans. Thank you so much.
Threat.
I'll get to all of your guys' questions, I promise. Just waiting for him to finish.
How swift gains in territory eventually give way to grinding occupations, acts of mass civil disobedience, and strategic dead ends. The next few weeks and months will be hard on the people of Ukraine. Putin has unleashed a great pain on them, but the Ukrainian people have known 30 years of independence.
Sign language lady is the new bae. I want to know if she's single, honestly.
Take their country backwards. This is a dangerous moment for all of Europe, for the freedom around the world. Putin has committed an assault on the very principles that uphold the global peace. But now, the entire world sees clearly what Putin and his Kremlin allies are really all about. This was never about
Hey, Patriots fan, thank you so much for your donation to St. Jude's. Appreciate you, man. Thank you.
About Putin's desire for empire by any means necessary, by bullying Russia's neighbors.
Hey, Lucas, thank you so much.
By changing borders by force, and ultimately by choosing a war without a cause. Putin's actions betray his sinister vision for the future of our world, one where nations take what they want by force. But it is a vision that the United States and freedom-loving nations everywhere will oppose with every tool of our considerable power. The United States and our allies and partners will emerge from this stronger, more united, more determined, and more purposeful. And Putin's aggression against Ukraine will end up costing Russia dearly, economically and strategically. We will make sure of that. Putin will be a pariah on the international stage. Any nation that countenances Russia's naked aggression against Ukraine will be stained by association.
Y'all are hilarious. These comments are... It's taken me everything not to respond to each one, but I want him to finish.
Totally unjustifiable war on Ukraine.
I think he said the important parts already, though.
And the rest of the world stronger. Liberty, democracy, human dignity, these are the forces far more powerful than fear and oppression. They cannot be extinguished by tyrants like Putin and his armies. They cannot be erased by from people's hearts and hopes by any amount of violence and intimidation. They endure. In the contest between democracy and autocracy, between sovereignty and subjugation, make no mistake, freedom will prevail. God bless the people of a free and democratic Ukraine, and may God protect our troops.
Mr. President.
Let's see if he takes questions.
Do you have any plans to speak with President Putin at this point, and what interactions have you had with the Russian government?
I heard the first part. Do I have any plans to speak with Putin at this point, and what?
What communications have you had with the Kremlin as far as military operations in Ukraine and making sure this does not spiral into a larger conflict?
Well, it's a large conflict already. The way we're going to ensure it's not going to aspire to a larger conflict is by providing all the forces needed in the Eastern European nations that are members of NATO. NATO is more united than it's ever been, and I have no plans to talk with Putin.
No plans to talk to Putin, he said.
Street Journal, Tarina.
I don't know if that's a good plan.
Mr. President, you didn't mention SWIFT in your sanctions that you announced. Is there a reason why the U.S. Isn't doing that? Is there a disagreement among allies regarding SWIFT and whether Russia should be allowed to be a part of it?
Sanctions that we've proposed on all their banks have of equal consequence, maybe more consequence than SWIFT.
It's not beer.
Number two, it is always an option, but right now that's not the position that the rest of Europe wishes to take. Cecilia Vega, ABC.
Sir, sanctions clearly have not been enough to deter Vladimir Putin to this point. What is going to stop him? How and when does this end? And do you see him trying to go beyond Ukraine?
SWIFT is the global payment system that allows you to send wires.
The threat that he gave, the West will face consequences greater than any you have faced in history. Is he threatening a nuclear strike?
I have no idea what he's threatening. I know what he has done, number one. And number two, no one expected the sanctions to prevent anything from happening. It has to show, this is going to take time, and we have to show resolve so he knows what's coming. And so the people of Russia know what he's brought on them. That's what this is all about.
Y'all are wild in the comments today, boy.
These sanctions are coming, I'm going to stand down. He's going to test the resolve of the West to see if we stay together, and we will. We will, and it will impose significant costs on him.
Will he go beyond Ukraine, sir? Do you see him going beyond?
Yes.
Two topics, just really quick. First, markets are down and gas prices are up. I know you always stress the difference between Wall Street and Main Street, but everybody seems to be in for some economic pain. How economically painful is it going to get for people in this country? And I do have one more question.
First of all, there's no doubt that when a major nuclear power attacks and invades another country, that the world is going to respond, and markets can respond all over the world. So there's no doubt about that, number one. Number two, the notion that this is going to last for a long time is highly unlikely as long as we continue to stay resolved in imposing the sanctions we're going to impose on Russia, period. What's the next question? I'm sorry.
The next question is, did you underestimate Putin, and would you still describe him the way that you did in the summer as a worthy adversary?
At the time, he was, I made it clear, as an adversary, and I said he was worthy. I didn't underestimate him. And I've read most of everything he's written. Did you read? I shouldn't. I'm not being a wise guy. You heard the speech he made.
Appreciate you, Mr. J, for your donation.
Ukraine. He has much larger ambitions in Ukraine. He wants to, in fact, reestablish the former Soviet Union. That's what this is about. And I think that his ambitions are completely contrary to the place where the rest of the world has arrived.
You're confident that these devastating sanctions are going to be as devastating as Russian missiles and bullets and tanks?
Yes, Russian bullets, missiles, and tanks in Ukraine. Yes, I am.
Thank you, President Biden. If sanctions cannot stop President Putin, what penalty can?
I didn't say sanctions couldn't stop him.
You've been talking about the threat of these sanctions for several weeks now.
Yes, but the threat of the sanctions and imposing the sanctions and seeing the effect of the sanctions are two different things. They're two different things. And he's going to begin to see the effect of the sanctions.
And what will that do?
Tamir, appreciate you, brother. Thank you for your donation.
So
Ukraine as we
weaken his
speak.
country that he'll have to make a very, very difficult choices of whether to continue to move toward being a second-rate power or, in fact, respond.
You said in recent weeks that big nations cannot bluff when it comes to something like this. You recently said that the idea of personally sanctioning President Putin was on the table. Is that a step that you're prepared to take? And if
It's
not,
not a bluff, it's on the table.
sanctioning President Putin?
Yes.
Why not sanction him today, sir? Mr. President? Why not sanction him today, sir?
Mr. President, if I can, you detailed some severe and swift new sanctions today and said the impact it will have over time. But given the full-scale invasion, given that you're not pursuing disconnecting Russia from what's called SWIFT, the international banking system, or other sanctions at your disposal, respectfully, sir, what more are you waiting for?
Specifically, with the sanctions we've imposed,
The thing is, the U.S. doesn't have any leverage.
exceed anything that's ever been done. The sanctions we impose.
So they're looking to keep these additional sanctions in their back pocket because they have no more bullets in the chamber. Those are the only bullets in the chamber left, aside from a full-scale war, which is not going to happen.
You spoke to Vladimir Zelensky yesterday, sir.
What's the risk that we are watching the beginning of another Cold War? And is there now a complete rupture in U.S. and Russian relations?
There is a complete rupture right now in U.S.-Russian relations if they continue on this path that they're on. And in terms of a Cold War, that depends. You have the vast majority of the rest of the world in total opposition to what he's doing, from Asia to South America to Europe to around the world. And so it's going to be a cold day for Russia. The idea, you don't see a whole lot of people coming to his defense.
And are you, if I could follow up, sir, are you urging China to help isolate Russia? Are you urging China to help isolate Russia?
I'm not prepared to comment on that at the moment.
The reason you would sanction Putin, Aguirre, is because you want to deter other nations from being able to do this, right? Because now China's looking at this with a sense of encouragement that, hey, what's the leverage? What's stopping us from invading Taiwan, for instance?
Moves into NATO countries.
Well, if he did move into NATO countries, he will be involved. We will be involved. The only thing that I'm convinced of is if we don't stop now, he'll be emboldened. If we don't move against him now with these significant sanctions, he will be emboldened. And look, you know, well, anyway.
And can you talk anything more about your conversation? Mr. President,
Why not sanction Putin directly today?
All the reporters are asking why he won't sanction Putin directly today.
The major defense partner of the United States. Is India fully with you on the issue of Ukraine and Russia?
Does the Defense Department of the United States?
So India is one of your major defense partners. Is India fully in sync with the United States on Russia?
We're in consultation with India today. We haven't resolved that completely.
One more question.
Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you.
Yeah, they, unfortunately probably told him to get off stage. He was being signaled off stage. See, look, I know that there is a lot of, I don't even want to call it hate, but there's a lot of criticism of Biden, at least I see in the comments, as well as in general. And regardless of what side of the political aisle you land, and I'll get to your guys' questions in a second, especially as it pertains to the market, because at the end of the day, this is a market channel. But regardless of what side of the political aisle you stand, there's no question, in my mind at least, that he is, his mental faculties are compromised because he is an elderly person. I mean, think of anyone in your life that's nearing 80, whether it's your dad or your grandfather. I couldn't imagine, my dad is 70 and I couldn't imagine him being president. So, age affects people differently. I know that Trump was in his 70s, but, it's tough when you have a president that, how should I say this delicately? It's tough when you have a president that can't freely speak for hours in the way that previous presidents have spoken, spontaneously, answering questions robustly, not being wheeled off when there's a sense that he might be, getting tired or might sound incoherent, which I think, if you're honest, again, regardless of which side of the political aisle you stand, is sort of clear, especially in times of distress. Now, if the country is doing well and we're not in sort of this geopolitical environment, then yeah, I mean, I guess you could just have a sort of a representative who you call president, regardless of who that person is. The country behind the scenes is operating normally. But during times of geopolitical distress, you need someone, regardless of whether they're Democrat or Republican or independent, to be able to appear robust in that situation. So I get some of the criticism for sure. And even from my objective point of view, and you guys know I'm a political cynic. I don't trust any politician, regardless of what party line or what party they represent. even from me, you know, I can look at that and see that from an outsider's point of view, that does not sort of showcase strength at a time when you need to showcase strength, right? So I could see where the criticism would fall on that. Don Geo, stick to the market. You are digging a hole. How am I digging a hole? I guarantee you I can go toe to toe with you on any political front, any historical front. Come at me. He can't formulate a sentence. I mean, that's sort of an exaggeration, but yeah, that's kind of in line with what I'm talking about, is that it does seem that, you know, he's not able to be as robust as someone who is younger and has more of a stable mind frame, I guess. Right. All right, let us get back to the market. I wanted to answer a lot of your questions as it pertained to the market. So some people were asking, why is the market going up? You know, the market is obviously experiencing volatility here, but you know, as I said earlier on the Discord, there are certain stocks and certain indices that cannot be ignored at these prices. Absolutely cannot be ignored at these prices, right? So if you take a look at, for instance, the chart of Apple, right? This is one that I was looking at this morning. And by the way, guys, send me your questions so that I can answer them, especially if it pertains to the market. I was saying that Apple is down 17%, right? Apple is down 17%, and at a major support level, it's in the 150s. It actually hit almost 150 in pre-market. It might have gotten, no, I don't think it went below 150 pre-market, but this is a stock that everyone said, oh, if Apple is 150, I'm going to buy a shitload of it, right? In my point of view, regardless of what happens on the geopolitical front, that all will eventually be resolved, right? Unless you're one of these hyperbolic people that think that we're on the verge of World War III. Other than that, right, which I don't think we are, and as you heard, the White House says they have no intention of going into an active military campaign in Ukraine, the U.S. will do what it has been doing all along, which is support factions, support other countries, support NATO, etc., with armaments, might send troops to the border, but in terms of actively fighting Russians on the battleground, that's not going to happen, right? So history has shown that conflicts have actually been good for the stock market. And we saw a major overreaction. If you guys saw the price of futures this morning, just absolutely tanked. You know, we had stocks like Apple, Microsoft, the NASDAQ tanked. You look at Coca-Cola, which has been a beast. It gapped down this morning, right? You see that here. All of these value and growth stocks, these blue chip value and growth stocks, were at a major discount this morning. Now, is this the bottom? That is very hard to tell because, and it's not because of the geopolitical situation. You know, we were forming this head and shoulders here starting in August of 2021, honestly. Not saying we knew it would happen in August 2021. I'm saying that the left shoulder started in August 2021. And then by January, it was clear that the market was looking toppy and the inflation picture is the greatest danger, right? So, you know, in my view, the greatest danger is still the inflation story. And that is why it's hard to predict whether this is the market bottom or not, because we still have the CPI print coming on March 10th. We have the FOMC meeting coming on March 16th. And I shared this yesterday. I'm looking for the actual chart of what I'm talking about. Yeah, so I shared this yesterday. This is very reminiscent of what happened in 2018 and 2019, where we had a tightening tantrum as well. You know, when the Fed was announced, before the Fed announced that they were going to start letting assets roll off the balance sheet back in 2019, and then finally decided to do it in March of 2019, we saw this growth scare because of that. And we saw the stock market further tank, right? This was after the FOMC meeting back in 2019. So, you know, the very same thing could happen here depending on the CPI print. If inflation comes out a lot hotter than expected, then unfortunately that could spell disaster for the markets, because it will then, the Fed will be hamstrung and they'll be forced to do something while there are these geopolitical events going on. And while the stock market is still tumbling. So there could definitely be room for further down. And it's not because of what's going on with Russia and Ukraine per se, but more so with the inflation picture. Now, the Russia-Ukraine story can definitely spur a recession or a near recession in Europe. I showed this yesterday in my video, but if you look at this, Russia is literally ranks at the absolute bottom of the top 30 trading partners for the United States. But who's number one? It's the European Union, right? The European Union is the top trading partner for the United States, followed by China, Canada, Mexico, etc. But Russia is dead last, okay? So Russia does not directly affect what's going on in the U.S. However, Russia does directly affect what's going on with the European Union, and the European Union is the U.S.'s number one trading partner, right? So, yeah, I mean, with that said, can you guys see my? Oh, yeah, okay. So with that said, that is where the danger lies, is if, there is a spike in oil prices. And I said this in my video yesterday, watch for oil spiking above $100, because that is going to happen. And if you look at the WTI futures, which are the oil futures, you could see that they actually did hit $100 this morning, or near $100, $99.50. We've seen a drawdown since then. Now, one of the conclusions from that White House meeting, and I'll take your questions right after that, but one of the conclusions from the White House briefing was, we're not imposing direct sanctions on Putin. We're not imposing sanctions in the form of SWIFT. SWIFT is the global banking system, right, that allows you to send wires and whatnot. So when countries and companies trade with each other overseas, they use SWIFT in order to transact, right? But nobody's imposing SWIFT restrictions or sanctions on Russia at the moment. Now, the reason they aren't doing that is because there is no leverage. And so the West needs as much leverage as possible, of which they have very little. So they need bullets in the chamber in case there is a further escalation. So that's why the reporters were saying, hey, how come you don't sanction Russia further? How come you don't sanction Putin directly? How come you aren't sanctioning them in the form of SWIFT? And that is the real reason, is because they need bullets in the chamber in case further escalation happens. Then they deploy those things. But if that's all you have, then unfortunately, sanctions aren't really going to work, especially as, Russia is benefiting from this surge in oil prices. And secondly, China is very willing and has already agreed to buy more stuff from Russia, right? In the in the event that sanctions are taking place, they've come in to fill the void and make up for any losses that Russia will experience from those sanctions, right? So hopefully that makes sense. Why is oil tanking today? Oil is not tanking today. See, it's crazy that sometimes perspective is everything. Oil is still up 2% today, which is a lot for oil prices for a one-day move. But it did hit the near $100 mark, and it has since come down, but it is still up 2% today. It's not tanking. All right, let me get to your questions. Let's see. It's just a bunch of Trump versus Biden. Guys, come on. Let's be a little more sophisticated here. All right. How can one with no experience buy stocks? I mean, anyone can buy stocks. You just have to have a brokerage account. All right. As long as no NATO country is being attacked by Russia, no World War III. Yeah, that's certainly true. All right. Guys, if you want me to ask more poignant questions, ZOM, CVX, all tanking. Yeah, those are U.S. oil companies, right? And it's because the price of oil has has basically hit a peak. But also, if the situation is if the situation is that China and other countries are now going to step up to the plate and buy oil from Russia, right, and potentially discounted prices, then that means less business for U.S. oil companies, right? So yeah, what's in store for Power Hour? You think? Again, I mean, as I said on the Discord this morning, if you look at the stock alerts that I sent out, I was saying that this is a buying opportunity on a lot of stocks. And if you had bought when I sent this out at 7:47 a.m. Pacific time, so this was what, 4 hours ago now almost. And if you had bought then, you would be up right now, which I'm not saying these were swing trades. They were not. But again, some of these things were too low to ignore. The triple Qs officially hit bear market status this morning at minus 20%, have since gone up. The triple Qs is the ETF that tracks the NASDAQ. It's not that you're trying to find a bottom. It's that regardless of whether this is the bottom or not, these are definitely lucrative buys here that you may not get the opportunity to buy in the future. And even if the stock market does go lower, buying the NASDAQ at a 20% discount, overall 20% discount, I mean, historically, that has always worked out in your favor. When Apple gets near 20% down, I want to buy it as well. I also made purchases on SPY-V, which is the value ETF of the S&P 500 that tracks only value stocks and not growth stocks, because value stocks have been ripping in relation to growth stocks, and they will tend to do better during high inflationary environments and high interest rate environments. So hopefully that makes sense. L-Man for Life says, I bought Tesla and Apple this morning. Yes. I mean, that is, again, from my experience, and I always say this, and I say this in the Discord too, those that pray for the dip never buy the dip. And it's so true. Everyone's screaming about how Apple is too expensive, hitting the $3 trillion mark, almost $190. Oh, I can't wait till Apple tanks. I will for sure load the boat. Well, Apple's not, hit 150 and all you hear is crickets. And that's fine. Everybody can do what they want. It's just, that is the dynamic, and I've seen it time and time and time again, is that when the event actually happens and the stock market starts tanking, fear kicks in, because at the end of the day, we are apes and we are sort of programmed to survive. And these mechanisms, these natural mechanisms kick in place and our antennas go up. But if you, want to make a sort of if you want to make gains long-term in your portfolio, and I told you Apple was 20%, any other time you would have bought. But during the time that Apple's is actually 20% down, you start letting, panic set in. So wish I bought more QQQ this morning. Yeah, I mean, again, it's not necessarily the bottom. You might actually have a chance to buy the triple Qs again at this price. Remember, this is only one candle down after confirming the head and shoulders. But, it is funny that I drew this Fibonacci yesterday, and folks were asking me, what is the next support for the triple Qs? And I said around 315, and it hit a low of 318 today. So, this to me is definitely a buy point for the long term. We're talking about lows that we've established in May of 2021. And back in May 2021, I'm sure everybody was wishing that they had bought the previous dip. And back then, everyone was wishing that they bought the previous dip, right? So this is how the story goes. And we are also seeing bullish divergence between the price and the RSI as well, and between the price and the MACD. But, I would be very reluctant to call this a bottom without getting a clear picture on what inflation looks like. Because if inflation is estimated to be at 7% on March 10th, and I'm not sure what the I got to look up what the estimation is, and it comes in at 8%, oh my God, all hell will break loose. You will see the stock market crash way more, right? We'll probably see everything in bear market territory, all the indices. All right. War is priced in, huh? In what sense do you mean, JFlow? It depends. I mean, it depends on what you mean. Further escalation than this? No, it wouldn't be, obviously. They're also probing Elon's brother. Bought a big chunk of VTI at 207. Yeah, that is amazing. That's the Vanguard Total Stock Market ETF, right? Yeah, I like this. I mean, this is a well-diversified portfolio, also showing that same head and shoulders, and unsurprisingly, as the NASDAQ and the S&P 500. But yeah, let's see what is, if there's any more escalation in the news front.
Ukraine, then we would have missile strikes, aerial strikes, and Russian troops moving forward. Again, we don't know exactly where those Russian troops will go, what they will do, how or when or if they will attack Kyiv, but it is something we're standing by for at the moment. David, again, no sounds here yet of any sort of action, but we are braced for that.
Martha, you've been on the ground in Ukraine for several days now, and we have witnessed an extraordinary change in the temperature from the leadership of Ukraine just in the last couple of hours. The president of Ukraine, President Zelensky, addressing the Ukrainian people, actually revealing that he tried to reach out, tried to call Vladimir Putin today, that Putin did not take the call. And after days of saying his country should remain united, tonight he addressed the Russian people directly, saying, we do not want war, saying that the Russians have been watching a Ukraine that is not the real Ukraine, that the message from Putin that they're going to free Ukrainians, he said, we are a free people.
And he was met with silence, he said, when he tried to reach out to Vladimir Putin. Of course, President Zelensky several weeks ago and a week ago really was trying to tell people not to panic, that he didn't believe there was an invasion, so it really is a marked difference tonight. The U.S. has been trying to get President Zelensky to leave for his own safety. He obviously has not and is determined to stay, but that impassioned plea tells it all. He knows what's happening here tonight. He knows what is to come. A devastating war on the European continent, David.
Martha Raddatz, stay with us here as you have for many days now. I should mention that Secretary of State Antony Blinken told me earlier this evening that this orchestrated series of events, this request for Russian military help, is exactly what the U.S. had predicted, telling me in the last 24 to 48 hours or so, Russia had been putting the final touches together to be ready for a full-scale invasion. And tonight, Ukraine's leader has put the country under a state of emergency in addition to that message, not only to the people of Ukraine, but as Martha and I were just talking about, to the people of Russia, saying what you're...
All right, so it doesn't look like there are, we're going to get this type of coverage all day. It doesn't look like there's going to be much, updates, but we'll bring them to you as long as I'm live here. NASDAQ absolutely ripping up above 1%. It was down, I think, almost 2% today, back up over 1%. So like I said, when you see stocks that you really want to own, buy the fear, guys. I mean, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, like these are stocks that everybody wants to own, especially Google, because Google, remember, has a stock split coming up as well. So if, buying Google at a discount before the stock split, when the stock split is likely going to fuel the stock price as well, it was, to me, a no-brainer at 2,500. Again, it's not saying that this is the bottom, but if you see Google down 17.5% with an upcoming stock split, and it's a stock that you've wanted to own, why wouldn't you buy it at a discount, right? So, let's see more of your questions. You're the GOAT Bro only channel I watch now. I appreciate you, Brendan. I appreciate you. All right. 52K in 15 minutes. Is that what you made? Amazing if that's so. Can you explain the VIX? Yes. This is a very good question. And guys, I'll answer any question you leave. So leave your questions here. So the VIX is the volatility index, right? So the volatility index, this is calculated based off of S&P 500 options, right? So institutions and retail investors, obviously, but institutions mostly because they have larger orders. What they do is they engage in S&P options in order to hedge or make bets on where the market is going, right? So if you have a large fund, you might buy puts on the S&P 500 in order to hedge against any downturns. Same thing with, on the call side. So it takes into account the trading activity in the S&P 500 options chain. And based on that, a formula will spit out a VIX reading, which is the volatility index, and tell you the volatility that market makers are expecting for the market, right? So when the VIX is high, that tends to mean that options prices are also high. VIX is the outcome and not the factor. A lot of people think that it is a factor and not the outcome. VIX is actually the outcome. The VIX is calculated after all other option metrics are taken into place, but that's not an important distinction here. So when the VIX is high, that means that options are expensive and that we'll tend to see wild swings, as we saw with the NASDAQ, down 2% in the morning, up 1% now, right? But in general, if you bought options when the VIX was high and then the VIX started tanking or implied volatility started tanking, then the value of your options can decrease, and now they actually have to make a larger move in order for you to be profitable. That's why when implied volatility is high, we tend to be sellers of options, right? So, if you look at the hedges that we've been doing, we've been mostly selling vertical spreads against the index funds, like the SPY or the triple Qs, in order to hedge against the downturns in the market. And that's because the VIX is high and we're getting a lot of premium for selling those. Same thing for covered calls, right? You'd want to sell covered calls now because you get way more money than you should based on the fact that implied volatility is high. But in general, VIX is relative, but in general, we've seen that a healthy market that isn't expecting a lot of volatility, the VIX should be under 20. We haven't been able to get under 20 for much of 2022. There were a few spurts here and there in the beginning of January, but other than that, we've been above 20 the whole time, and even hit, almost 40 a couple times, including today with Russia's invasion of those Ukrainian territories. So that is the VIX. Any other questions that you guys have? Let's see. Worth checking up the good percentage calculator that shows what a stock down 20% will actually add when it returns where it was. Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I'll see if I can find that. Anyone know when the Google stock split is? I don't think there's an actual date yet. Could you believe in it? You have no fear. I don't know what that means. All right. XLE, time to sell or buy. No, XLE is a sell here, not a buy, because, as I said, XLE pumped into oblivion, especially with the price of a barrel of oil going up. However, after oil, right after it hit $100, started dropping again from those highs, still up today. But the fact that we likely will not get a lot of further business for U.S. oil companies, right? Especially if a lot of countries are going to be buying cheaper oil from Russia. In my view, XLE is a sell here, a take profit here, right? And then once it gets back to levels, let me pull up my moving averages. But once it gets back to, once we retest this trend line, which currently is at like the 200-day moving average, I would be interested in picking it up again. But yeah, we bought XLE way back when, towards the end of last year, after it retested the 200-day moving average and rode it all the way up. Same with XLF. Russia just seized control over Chernobyl nuclear plant. Yeah, that happened earlier. And there's conflicting reports about that, whether they've actually seized control of it, or are they just passing through there? Because to get from Belarus to Ukraine, I think you have to pass through that area where Chernobyl is. It's good that SWIFT restrictions are not imposed. The U.S. and EU will track Russian supporters by watching those transactions. Maybe. I haven't heard of that theory. I mean, I think Occam's razor plays more here, which is the simplest solution is usually the right one. And in my view, the simplest solution is that, they need bullets in the chamber to use as negotiating pieces, right? As strategic pieces to negotiate in case Russia takes it a step further. If you blow all of the bullets that you have in the chamber right now, then you have nothing left but a full-scale war, and that's not going to happen, right? When do you close your hedges for long-term investment? That is short puts. It depends on what the market is doing. But short puts are not hedges. Short puts are bullish. Short calls are bearish, but short puts are bullish, not bearish. By Facebook, DS will be exposed soon. What does that mean? Jesus, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Yeah, I mean, Facebook hit the 0.786 fib level. Now, I've made my position on Facebook pretty clear. I think that in the low 200s, Facebook is adequately valued if we're just talking about its advertising business, right? Because Facebook has spent so much money on the metaverse, it's that you have to assume that business, like if you assume that business is a wash, meaning we'll never see any money coming from Facebook's metaverse business, then you have to value it based on its advertising business, which is in the low 200s, trading at a decent multiple. This is what it was trading at before all of the metaverse talk, even before the COVID crash of March 2020, right? So in the low 200s, I'm comfortable buying Facebook. I just don't think that we'll see it near 400 again for a very long time, unless in the next 3-4 earnings rounds, it can somehow prove that the metaverse investments are panning out or will pan out, at least give a glimmer of a hope through objective data that the metaverse investments will pan out, right? So, all right. That is Facebook. Is it possible for SPY to go down further? No, not possible at all. It's actually impossible. It will never go down further again. I mean, what do you think? Of course it's possible. It's a market. Yes, of course it's possible. I mean, I just got done telling you about the inflation picture, right? So, we don't know what's going to happen March 10th. But as I've said before, the lead up to the war is when all the panic sets in, right? We've talked about this time and time again. The lead up to a war or a conflict is when all the panic sets in. But the start of a conflict, unfortunately, is usually good for the stock market. Now, if we didn't have the inflation and the Fed story as the backdrop, then this, for me, would be a certain buying opportunity, as in go all in buying opportunity, right? That's if we didn't have the Fed and the inflation picture in the backdrop. Unfortunately, that is not the case. We do have the Fed and the inflation picture in the backdrop. And it's not going to come up for another 3 weeks, right? So we could easily see, a false rally before another drop. Of course we could see that. But that still does not excuse the fact that blue chip stocks that everyone was crying about, wanting to buy cheaply, are at those prices today or were at those prices today. And I guarantee you a lot of people did not pick them up, right? So, the stock market is not going to keep giving you opportunities to retroactively look back and say, oh, you know what, I should have bought that. You can't go back in time. So when those opportunities on stocks that you want present themselves, guess what? Got to cough up the cash, buddy. So let's see. I know I missed a lot of questions. Shafiq, I think I missed your question, bro. You had oh no, you just had a funny comment. You should hire the sign language lady for your videos. She's probably expensive as fuck. Let's be honest. Right now, she's a star. She's a superstar. So she's probably commanding like a 6-figure salary, And at this point, that's not really the best way to use the funds from the channel. So please take this question. Apple price to sales ratios above, and historically it has been around 3 to 4. Above 6, what do you think justifies Apple higher valuation today compared to history? Well, Apple's product lineup is not Apple's product lineup is not stagnant, right? So there are two main drivers, I think, of Apple's valuation. One is the fact that it's now vertically integrating its own chips, right? And has done so at a successful a very high level, almost a perfect level compared to utilizing chips from outside sources. So if you've seen the performance of the M1 chips, it's unreal. So the M1 chips, and then I guess they're calling it, is it M1 Max, M1 Pro, whatever. But their silicon is unreal. It's a game changer. It's a game changer, right? And also, over time, that will improve their margins, right? So as they scale, obviously R&D, when you're developing something, R&D is the most expensive portion of that development. Once something is developed and you're able to scale it, right, then it becomes cheaper and cheaper over time. So the fact that they will increase their margins over time just by moving towards producing their own silicon, not only that, it will improve their sales because now their computers run even more efficiently. So there's going to be a higher demand for those computers and phones. And two, the second large thing that we're forgetting about is their aspirations for developing a full-scale EV, which I think they will definitely do. It's just a matter of how that happens. So yes, you're talking about an entirely new sector in their own silicon and an entirely new sector in producing their own EV. So again, I mean, to each their own. Like if you don't think that those justify, a higher price to sales ratio, or a higher price multiple, then sure, by all means, that's fine. But I think they do. Apple Silicon is unreal. Fully agree. Yes. When the third, fourth generation, yes, for sure. Gunmetal, for sure. What's up, man? How you doing? Is TSM at risk of Chinese invasion? Taiwan is at risk of Chinese invasion, which would make TSM a target. But TSM, in my view, I think TSM started building out their fabs a bit too late. Even though, I mean, it is the right move, building out fabs outside of Taiwan. This is something that they probably should have done a decade ago. But yeah, of course, TSM is at risk if China invades, right? But they are developing facilities outside of Taiwan for a reason, outside of the reach of the Chinese government. Z, can we see quads, quads or abs? Crazy. A lot of people don't have money. We tight down here. Are you referring to what? Buying the dips? Yeah, I mean, certainly that's understandable. But in my view, there weren't a lot of buys in the last couple of months. Like even if you look at the alerts, we didn't make too many purchases. There are, in my view, certain times where buying heavier is justified, right? Gelu Sherpa, love your content. Z, learning a lot from your videos. Appreciate you. Hit that thumbs up, guys. Everybody who's on the stream right now, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up. Like literally everybody. And I could see the count. There's definitely less thumbs up than there are people watching this. So yeah, make sure you hit that thumbs up so that other people can find the stream. It's not because like I want to boost my ego or something. Aside from using Tesla as your personal ATM, what other stocks or ETFs can be used? Oh, you mean for selling cash secure puts? Well, Amazon is one of them for sure. The reason I say that about Tesla is because it's an expensive stock and the options prices are usually very expensive, but it never goes below a certain level or rarely goes below a certain level, right? So I know folks that are in the Discord this morning, there are some folks who sold the 600 put for a lot of money this morning as Tesla neared 700, right? So yeah, but I want you guys to be clear that we're not out of the woods yet. Like we're seeing a very nice recovery today. We might see another green day tomorrow. I still think that this is a buy on very select quality stocks and ETFs, but we're not out of the woods yet because the inflation picture is completely unknown, right? So yeah. Sinan, please take this question. I talked about this already. The likelihood that this is the bottom. I've talked about it. You have to have 100 shares though. To sell covered calls, yes. To sell cash secure puts, no. You always get a like from me, bro. Appreciate you, Tristan. Appreciate you. CSP, you need money to cover that. Yes. But when you're selling a CSP, you're doing so on a margin account. So you don't need the full collateral, right? It's usually on blue chip stocks. It'll be somewhere in the 30 to 40% of the total collateral needed range. Are Intel, Rocket Mortgage, and Alibaba? I mean, you couldn't pick higher quality stocks. Intel's for sure a buy, right? Intel's for sure a buy in my view. As I highlighted here, anytime it touches this level, I'm a buyer, and you're seeing a nice bullish engulfing candle here. So yes, Intel for sure is a buy. Alibaba, I don't touch whatsoever, and Rocket Mortgage, is it a penny stock yet? Let's see, almost no. Rocket Mortgage is definitely not a buy. Not for me. Do you have a subscription product? Yes, if you want to sign up to the Discord, right, and I'm missing a lot of dope trades right now because I sent out this day trade watch list, and a lot of these calls are probably on fire right now. The puts were on fire this morning. Calls are probably on fire right now, right, with this bounce back. But yes, link is in the description. So if you're interested, sign up, buddy. All right, let us see what is on in the news front.
Vladimir Putin's playbook. Is he the cold, calculated KGB former profiler, or is he a man bent on achieving his true objective, which is to rebuild the Russian Empire? Could he be both of those things? It was a very, very scary speech, David.
Just an extraordinary split screen playing out on the world stage. The reality that Vladimir Putin is trying to present to the Russian people versus what the West has signaled to the world for several weeks now about Vladimir Putin's plans in Ukraine. I should mention we're hearing sirens now going off in Kyiv, of course, the capital of Ukraine, in addition to bombs, explosions off in the distance, both in Kyiv and in Kharkiv, which is north of the Donbass region. All of that playing out at this hour. We also are aware of this emergency meeting at the United Nations. You can hear the explosions there in the distance. The UN Security Council meeting at this hour, and the U.S. ambassador to the UN had already told the UN General Assembly just today that Vladimir Putin has asked the world to travel back in time by more than 100 years to an age of empires. And Martha Raddatz back with us tonight. And Martha, I am just struck that what authorities here in the U.S. had warned would happen, the sequence of events that they prepared the American people for, and much of the world for that matter, have begun to play out in exactly the sequence that they had predicted.
It certainly has, David, and the administration kept saying.
Shout out to the people of Ukraine, man. Hopefully everybody's safe. First and foremost, honestly, I mean, that's, I mean, I think that there's sort of a general confusion as to why this is going on right now, right? Like what's in it for, oh, wow, NASDAQ almost up 2%. NASDAQ just shot up almost 2%. It's up almost a full 2%. This is probably one of the wildest intraday swings ever. The S&P 500 is finally green. And the Russell is up 1%. It's only the Dow Jones Industrial Average that's down 0.82%. And yeah, I mean, you know, basically the Dow Jones Industrial Average contains some mega cap tech, as you see here, Apple, Microsoft, CRM, but a lot of it is also pharmaceutical companies. It's basically a mix of 30 companies in most of the major industries. So consumer discretionary, financials, healthcare, consumer staples, communication, industrials, energy, materials, and then tech, right? So yeah, you're seeing a lot of stocks in the industrials, in a lot of the sectors of the industrials down at the moment because of you know, the fact that the geopolitical situation is volatile at the moment, right? So industrials tend to take a hit during that time. But crazy swing that we're seeing on the NASDAQ. That's why I told you guys this morning. That's why I tried to tell you guys this morning. Don't be concerned with whether this is the bottom or not. You see something you really want. The NASDAQ is down 20%. I don't care what's going on in the market, right? Or in the world for that matter. I care about what's going on in the world. I mean, it doesn't matter what's going on. If I'm looking at the screen and I see the NASDAQ is down 20%, I'm going to buy that, right? Regardless of what's going on. But yeah, prayers out to the people of Ukraine. I mean, so, what I was saying about why Putin is doing this at the moment. I know that there's a lot of confusion, and rightfully so, because it doesn't seem to benefit Russia, and it just seems like an ego power play. The answer is probably a lot more complicated than that. Yes, I'm sure that he wants to sort of recreate this version of the Soviet Union before his time is done. But a lot of it does have to do with trying to fill in anywhere that there's a power vacuum, with the decline of Russia as a superpower, trying to sort of reassert themselves as a superpower. And that is why they've aligned with countries that the U.S. has deemed as adversaries. So if you look at, why is Russia generally aligned with Iran, Syria, North Korea, and China? It's not because they have any sort of affinity towards those cultures or those countries. It's because that is where the power vacuum and the sort of the optimal strategy lies, right? So I still don't know how invading Ukraine in general plays into that, but it certainly does do a lot to assert themselves as sort of a country that recognizes the West doesn't have any leverage against them. So it is purely just a power play. And then obviously there are residual effects, like the price of oil shooting up, which benefits Russia as well. But yeah. All right, let's see. I think it's a dead cat bounce. Again, it could be. Doesn't matter to me. NASDAQ is down 20%. I'm taking it. Apple is down 17%. I'm taking it. Doesn't matter to me if it's a dead cat bounce or not, because what is a fact is that those actual blue chips are down by that much, right? What isn't a fact is whether this is a dead cat bounce or not. That's not a fact. So people are going to get burned waiting eventually, right? Not saying this is the time, but eventually those who are waiting for the absolute bottom and who have sold out of the market are going to miss the best days in the market. They will. It's just a fact. That's how it happens. Can you please explain dark pool section you started? Yes. So you're referring to the bots that I have here, right? So we have the sweeps, we have the huge options orders, we have the dark pools. So dark pools are basically large orders that are conducted. They're not options, by the way. These are shares, right? Dark pools are orders that happen off of the exchange, and they happen off of the exchange. I know that they have sort of a nefarious name. Dark pool does sound kind of mysterious and nefarious, but the reason that they exist, and they're legal, by the way, they're not illegal, is so that institutions can buy and sell large amounts of shares without affecting what is going on the primary market, right? So they do this off market. That's what dark pools are. Sweeps are related to options, and these are large option orders that are split up and occur over different exchanges in order to sort of hide or obfuscate what institutions are doing. So yeah, but essentially they are just large options orders. So you're seeing a lot of calls coming in on Bank of America, PayPal, Palo Alto Networks, Microsoft. Not a surprise there, right? Not a surprise there. Apple, we saw at 11:13, I was on the stream telling you about Apple. We saw a lot coming in at the 160 strike. So yes, and we have all this in the Discord as well. So you get access to all of this stuff. Again, that link is in the description if you're interested to sign up. All right, let's see. Cybersecurity is going up for sure. For sure. Cybersecurity is going up because of the fact that, it is seen as a sector of the security stocks, right? And also, they are now likely going to be contracted even more to make sure that we don't suffer any sort of cyber attacks from Russia. So yes, it definitely makes sense that cybersecurity is going up. All right. Putin will try and install a pro-Russia government in Ukraine just like they used to have before the revolution. No, this will not work. Oleg says, no, this will not work. I think that try to install is, yes, that's one of his aspirations for sure. Now, whether it will work or not, I don't know. Again, what is the leverage, guys? What is the leverage here, right? I want you to think about this. So what is the leverage that the U.S. or the West has against Russia and Putin? They don't have much. There's NATO, right? NATO is a force that is comprised of a unified front between European countries, Canada, U.S., etc. But aside from direct military conflict, there isn't much they can do. So you have to think about what is the leverage that the West has. Just like with the annexation of Crimea, there was a lot of tough talk, but what was the leverage there? Especially when you have, China now coming in and being there to support Russia in case, in lieu of any sanctions that Russia suffers, right? So I don't know. It's a shitty situation, for sure. All right. Biggest benefit, it's smokescreen for midterms. I'm not sure what you mean. Oh, I see what you mean. You mean sort of as a way to temporarily ignore the midterm elections? I mean, I don't think this was all orchestrated for that. No. Putin I don't think is trying to use this as a smokescreen for the midterms, right? So, all right. Let's see. I believe those are applied from last night. Okay. What do you do when you hedge but the stock doesn't dip? Yeah, I mean that's called performance drag, right? So if your hedge is just as big as your position, then you're doing it wrong. Unless you sold out of all your positions and all you have are bearish bets, right? If inflation is 7%, what's your prediction? I don't know what that means. All I know is if inflation is above the expected CPI reading, then the market will definitely tank. Yes, the market will definitely tank. Yeah. All right. Are we out of the bear market now? Rewind the tape. Let's see. Can you show how to calculate fair value for a company? No, that's going to take a long time, but we are going to be doing a coaching session on the Discord to go over how to evaluate a company. You definitely want to show up to that. Coach K, who is our newest coach, she was a financial analyst at Payne Weber, is going to go over that. But yeah, she's been an amazing asset to the Discord, answering beginners' questions all day, every day. And we are going to be doing a coaching call where she will teach beginners how to evaluate companies. But, the quickest way to evaluate a company if you don't have any skills is to actually look it up on sites like Seeking Alpha or whatever. So if you look up... familiarize yourself with financial ratios, right? So what company were you looking at? I don't know. Let's look at Shopify. I don't know, randomly, which is a stock that I'm looking to buy soon, but all right. So if you look at the valuations, here's where you'll see how a company is valued with respect to its peers in the same sector, right? You want to look at price to sales, you want to look at price to book, and you definitely want to look at price to earnings. Those are the three main, I would say, markers on how a company's valued in relation to how a company's price is valued in relation to its earnings, its book value, and what it generates in sales, right? So if you don't know how to do this through an actual formula or, plugging in numbers off of the balance sheet and the income statement, then you can use a service like this, right? But it does behoove you to know how these things are calculated because it will allow you to Then when you're looking at financials and you look at a balance sheet, for instance, or an income statement, you're able to know exactly what this means. So, yeah. 80% of this chat doesn't know what net present value means. I mean, that's not something to laugh at, Jonathan. You know, there are a lot of beginners that are trying to learn this stuff, which is why they watch channels like this. You know, I'm sure there was a time you didn't know what net present value was. You know, it doesn't mean that you came out of the womb knowing all this shit, right? I'm not trying to embarrass you, but, you know, it's not something to laugh at. Like, you know, everyone's a beginner at some point. So, you know, definitely don't laugh at people that are in a position that you were once in, right? I'm sure that if I started quizzing you on your financial acumen, you would fall short, especially if we do it live in real time. So don't laugh at people. All right. Let's see. Z, with geopolitical instability, do you think the Fed will be hesitant to raise rates more than 25 basis points? No, yeah, I think they'll be very hesitant to do that. That's for sure. Actually, this is a very good segue into something that I wanted to look at in the midst of all this stuff. So let's see, what is the Fed expecting now? The Fed members are expecting for a rate hike. Yeah, you're so right. Your question is so on point. Look right now. I don't know if you could see this, but this was 60-something% a couple weeks ago. It was 30% yesterday. It is now at 9%. This is the probability that the Fed is going to raise rates by 50 to 75 basis points, meaning 0.5% to 0.75% on March 16th. Because of the instability, the geopolitical instability, and the turmoil it is causing to the markets, now the probability that the Fed will raise rates higher than 25 basis points is much, much lower, right? We went from 60-something% to, in light of all of these events now, 9%. So very good question. All right, guys, I appreciate you guys for joining the stream. Really appreciate you guys for joining. I love doing this stuff. I love, you know, trying to give you guys as much information as possible, especially as it happens. Try to break it down for you guys. So appreciate you for joining. Those who donated to St. Jude's, thank you so much. Appreciate you guys as well. And I will see a lot of you on the Discord, where I've been missing some crazy trades because the market has been recovering like nuts, but that's always the case. And I'm happy to do this instead of trading for myself. But I do have to get back to the Discord because Power Hour is now, we have one more hour left until the market closes, and I gotta be there for my people, yo. So yeah, thank you guys so much for joining. I appreciate each and every single one of you. And until the next one, peace.